Hello everyone, I welcome you all on behalf of The Dark for a 31st Dark Baithak. The Dark began in 2023 as a book review journal, publishing original reviews across disciplines and genres. From the start, we sought to reimagine the form of the book review itself, encouraging writing that moved beyond summary to engage deeply, reflectively, and more creatively with the world a book opens up. Over time, we grew into a biannual academic journal that now includes reviews, explainers, commentaries, and research essays. Each issue is built around a central theme, bringing together diverse voices that explore the intersections across social sciences. The Dark Baithak is our humble attempt to huddle around a small gathering of scholars, writers, and students from different fields to present ideas and initiate dialogues, bringing critical conversations to life. Today's discussion is titled The Story of a Sikh Museum Heritage, Politics, Popular Culture. What is a Sikh museum? Why is it worthwhile to study Sikh museums? This lecture is based on Kanika Singh's monograph, The Story of a Sikh Museum Heritage, Politics, Popular Culture, published by Cambridge University Press. The book is a case study of Bhai Mati Das Museum at Gurudwara Sheechganj, Delhi. It examines the process of creation of Sikh heritage through history, paintings, and museums, unearths the network which financed these, and analyzes the ways in which specific versions of the Sikh past are used to make present day claims. It is a commentary on the importance of Sikh museums and their relationship with Sikh history, popular art, and politics. The story of a Sikh museum is an entry point into the larger landscape of heritage and its popular and political uses. The lecture focuses on the unique elements of Sikh museums and highlights their importance in understanding museums and heritage in contemporary India. Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Kanika Singh as a guest. Dr. Kanika is a historian working on public history, museum, and heritage. She is the founder of Delhi Heritage Walks and the director of Center for Writing and Communication, Ashoka University. We are also very delighted to have Namyata with us, who is a student from CHS, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And I would now like to invite Dr. Kanika Singh to begin with her presentation.
Please just give me a moment.
Please take your time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, the team at The Dark, for inviting me to give this lecture. And thank you, members of the audience who have joined today to listen to me. I look forward to our discussion. So, what is a Sikh museum and why is it worthwhile to study Sikh museums? To answer these questions, I will today focus on unique elements of Sikh museums and I'll highlight their importance in understanding museums and heritage in contemporary India. And for further discussion, let me share my screen. Is it visible to everyone?
Yeah, it is visible.
Okay. So I'll share some audio-visual material to begin with, yeah. Please listen to this is a small clip about less than a minute, and I'd like you to pay particular attention to the visuals that are included in this song. Okay. Is anyone here a Sidhu Moosewala song fan? I'll take that as a no. Okay. So, but you've heard of him. You know who he is. He was a very popular Punjabi singer. And this particular song called Punjab, it was released during the farmers' protest in the year 2020. In this clip, you could see that there was a photo album that opens, and it has pictures, and the photo album opens to show images, pictures, as if they're photographs of Punjab's history. These images are part of Sikh museums. Let's look at the next one. This is a photograph I took in November 2021 at the farmers' protest, and this is one of the stages, one of the at Tikri Morcha. What you see here is the munch across right across the members who were participating in the farmers' protest in green and white. You can see their heads, but right, um, very clearly visible and very prominently visible where the speakers are on the left hand side is a very large banner of a Sikh warrior. He is Banda Bahadur, a 17th century Sikh warrior and martyr. The next one. This is a wall calendar published by the Punjab and Sindh Bank. I trust that many of you would be familiar with the name of the bank, even if you don't have a bank account here. This is a prominent bank in India, and this is a wall calendar from the year 1975. One of the inside pages, I've shown you the page from July, August. It has two images. These are the one at the top shows Maharani Sada Kaur, who was the mother-in-law of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and she's shown on horseback outside the Lahore fort, challenging the enemy. And in the image below, there is a woman, a Sikh woman, who is shown participating in the Jaito Morcha, the 1920s, and she's shown confronting the British soldiers. Yeah. This image is the cover of an illustrated storybook for children. This is a very popular book which is still available and produced in English, Punjabi, Hindi, and the image is again of Banda Bahadur. This one was published in 1993, and this was painted by artist Meher Singh. It was published by the SGPC, which is the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee. It is the largest, a very powerful body which manages historic Gurdwaras in India. Now, these seemingly distinct things which I've shared with you, Sidhu Moosewala's song, a children's storybook, the farmers' protest, a wall calendar from a bank. Yeah. These seemingly distinct things are related, and all of them are showing images from Sikh museums. So, what exactly is the relationship between all of them, and what exactly is the relationship with the Sikh museum? What exactly is the Sikh museum doing that all these sites are participating in some sort of a common goal? Yeah. This is the point I'll try and address and then show what is the relevance of Sikh museums today. Now, Sikh museums are also very different from a conventional museum, and I'll share a few examples to explain this point. So, there are collections of objects of Sikh history, Sikh art. Please excuse me, I have a cold. So there are collections of objects of Sikh history, Sikh art, both in private hands as well as in institutions, whether they are government institutions or private institutions, but also in public institutions. For example, the Khanuja collection. The Khanuja family in the USA has a very prominent Sikh collection, which is now part of museums in the USA. This is a sculpture of Ranjit Singh on the left, and this is jewelry on the right. The Tour collection, the Tour family in the UK, this is a miniature painting which is showing Ranjit Singh. Similarly, the Maharaja of Patiala, Amrinder Singh, who is a former Congress leader, now in BJP, his collection at Patiala is very prominent. There's a Sikh gallery in the Lahore Museum. This is an artifact from there. And all of these items, these collections rather, they include things like handwritten and illustrated manuscripts, miniature paintings, sculptures, clothes, coins, weapons, pieces of furniture. And most of these items are associated with the reign of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, early 19th century, and the subsequent colonial period. There are museums and collections in the diaspora. I already mentioned two. There is something called the Sikh Heritage Initiative, which is an entirely online initiative to put up in a digital 3D format objects, artifacts from Sikh history. There is another prominent museum, Sikh Heritage Museum in Canada, Abbotsford. All of these institutions, their emphasis, especially in the diaspora, their emphasis is to explain the Sikh community's links with that particular country, to show how Sikh community is an integral part of that country, along with promoting an understanding of Sikh religion, Sikh history, and Punjabi culture. So at the same time, these institutions in the diaspora collect material from the communities who are Sikh communities there, artifacts, diaries, documents, photographs, and showcase these to address contemporary issues. So, faced by the community. So, for instance, on the right, you see a poster which is titled "We Are Hockey." This was an exhibition hosted by this institution, which examined questions of race, ethnicity, sport, and decolonization in Canada. Another kind of collection is objects that are considered sacred in the Sikh community because of the association with the Sikh gurus. So this one is a photograph from the Akal Takht in the Golden Temple. They have a collection of weapons which are kept in a decorated canopy. You can see it beyond the gentleman who is standing with a sword, a khanda, and in that canopy, the weapons are carefully kept. They are brought out on specific times of the day for ritual darshan by the Sangats. Yeah. So that's another kind of a collection. Yet another is objects sacred to the gurus, which are held by individuals. They may or may not be prominently displayed. Sometimes they are just part of a home or a small gurdwara. An example is the chola or the robe of Guru Nanak at the town called Dera Baba Nanak. The picture on the right is a close-up shot of that robe. Picture on the left shows the room in the gurdwara where this artifact, this chola, is kept on the very right-hand side. And similar things might include footwear, writing, pieces of writing, along with weapons and clothes used by the gurus. Now, these collections or types of collections that I have shared with you. These are very, very different from the kind of museums I'm talking about. Sikh museums in India rarely have historical artifacts in the conventional sense, in the conventional museum sense. The display is unusual, for it is overwhelmingly made up of modern history paintings done in a Western academic or a realistic style. This is a picture of how a typical Sikh museum in India looks like. And it's like a gallery of modern history paintings. And in spite of the nomenclature of a museum, there is hardly any drive to collect, to classify, or to preserve historical remains in Sikh museum. In fact, Sikh museums rarely have a curator. It is common for artists to be associated with specific museums, creating paintings for display. These paintings themselves are, again, not museum objects in the conventional sense, nor are they relic items associated with the gurus. In fact, the museum display of modern history paintings is easily and popularly available everywhere, by which I mean popular culture. They are there in calendars, they are there in popular books, children's book, posters, pamphlets, music videos, animation. You can easily find them on the internet. And I initially shared some examples of these. Sikh museums also show a perceptible overlap of secular and the sacred. Typically, we consider the museum to be a very, very secular place. But in the Sikh museum, it is very evident that there is an overlap between two. The boundaries between the secular and the sacred are much blurred. And this is a point I can elaborate later. Moreover, there is a very large number of Sikh museums in India. They are mainly concentrated in the Punjab, Haryana, and Delhi, and all of them are built after independence. In fact, there are more and more Sikh museums which are coming up. They are still being commissioned. They are sponsored both by governments, the state governments, central government. At the same time, they are commissioned by religious authorities like the Gurdwara Management Committees, the most prominent of which is the STPC, but another one is the Delhi Sikh Gurdwara Committee. Very noticeably, the form, content, and the type of display of history paintings is nearly identical across museums, all of these museums. And as I said, still more are being commissioned and they continue to be built. Now, these are a combination of these factors. All of this sets apart the Sikh museum from a typical museum, whether we are talking in a Western sense or even in a South Asian context. Now, with this background, let me talk to you a little bit in detail about one specific Sikh museum, which is the case study of my book, the Bhai Mati Das Museum at Gurdwara Shishganj in Chandni Chowk, which is Old Delhi. So, if you have explored Old Delhi, gone there for food or shopping, or just for a heritage walk or a field trip, you will, if you're standing outside the Red Fort and the Chandni Chowk is in front of you, you walk down the Chandni Chowk and you see the Gauri Shankar temple. After a while, there is the Ghante Wala Halwai. And then you have the Gurdwara Shishganj standing very, very prominently on your left. And right in front of the Gurdwara, there is a Gol Chakkar, which is called the Fawara Chowk. And currently it is called the Bhai Mati Das Chowk. There is a shrine there. And on the right-hand side, just across from the Gurdwara on that roundabout is the Bhai Mati Das Museum. So here's a picture. On the left, you see this is a view of the Fawara area and the Chandni Chowk. The image you see, the building you see on the right, which has canopies, and on its right is a banner called Pal Associates. That building is the Bhai Mati Das Museum. In the center, you can see a fawara, which has been converted into a Sikh shrine, a white fountain-like thing. And the picture on the right is the facade of the Gurdwara Shishganj. So if you're standing at the fawara, at the fountain, you will see, in fact, if you can see my mouse, it's hovering over the fawara right now. This is the museum. And this is the Gurdwara Shishganj. So when you enter the museum, you enter this gate, you enter a large hall, you take off your shoes, you cover your head as if you would in a Gurdwara, and you enter a hall. The museum is on 2 stories. There's a basement and there is a floor where you enter. It was built in 2000, it was opened to public in 2001, and it is managed by the Delhi Sikh Gurdwara Committee. It is named after Bhai Mati Das, who was one of the three disciples of Guru Tegh Bahadur, and who is said to have been martyred at the Chandni Chowk in 1675 when Guru Tegh Bahadur was captured and killed by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. So this Fawara commemorates the site of their martyrdom. The museum itself has 169 paintings. This is in fact a view from inside the museum. And there are 169 paintings lined up like this. I'll give you a closer look. So each painting, this is oil, each of these paintings are oil on canvas. And they have been framed and put up with descriptions, as you can see. This painting is also relevant because it is the same painting I showed you, which was part of the Punjab and Sindh Bank calendar. Let me pull up the calendar once more. So on the right-hand side, top right, you see the painting reproduced in the 1975 calendar. It is on display at the Bhai Mati Das Museum. Now you can see that the style is realism. These paintings are organized chronologically. It starts with the display starts with the 10 Sikh gurus, Guru Nanak being the first one and Guru Gobind being the last. And it is subsequently followed by portraits or events from life of the most important people and episodes from Sikh history. So there are gurus' portraits, there are portraits of their most dedicated followers. There are scenes from their lives, how they interacted with each other, how they interacted with members of the community, how they interacted with other people, other religious personalities, or with emperors. It's about their teachings also. There are also scenes of Sikh martyrdom. There are commanders of Sikh military bands, which are called missiles, who rose to prominence in 18th century. Their exploits are also depicted here. In fact, the image on your screen, the painting on your screen, depicts an event from the 18th century, before the rise of Ranjit Singh. Then subsequently, the display goes on to the Maharaja Ranjit Singh's rule, and there are also saint poets who are called Bhagats in Sikh tradition. There are people like Baba Farid, people like Kabir, whose compositions are part of the Guru Granth Sahib. So their pictures are also their paintings are also part of the display. Then finally, there are paintings showing Sikh participation or Sikh resistance against the British colonial rule. There are freedom fighters like Bhagat Singh, whose portraits are part of the display. And finally, where it ends is showing Sikhs' participation in the Army of Independent India. But out of the 169, a majority of these paintings describe events up till the reign of Ranjit Singh, which is early 19th century. After that, there are very few canvases which talk about the other things I have mentioned, like British rule or independent India. These paintings have a especially interesting trajectory. This is because they were not made for display in the Sikh Museum. They were originally commissioned by the Punjab and Sindh Bank over a period of 3 decades, starting from the 1970s. And the bank commissioned these paintings for the purpose of illustrating its annual calendar. That is why the importance of this. Now, there were several artists who were commissioned by the bank. Artists like Devinder Singh, Kirpal Singh, Meher Singh, Bodh Raj, who were asked to paint themes and subjects from Sikh history for the purposes of this calendar. And I had the opportunity to interview some of the artists who participated in the creation of the calendar, and some of the members of the bank who were involved in this activity. And I asked them about the process. How did they go about making these paintings? Who chose the themes? How were these themes brought alive on canvas? What was the value of realism? And so on. And I'll only touch upon one aspect of these conversations about how these paintings were created. Where did the content come from? So both the artists and the members of the bank, they were very clear and insistent that creating these paintings involved both imagination and a lot of historical knowledge. They emphasized that historical study, in fact, a tremendous amount of historical study was undertaken to create these paintings. As one of the artists said to me, I have a lot of homework to do to create a painting, to see what kind of clothes, what kind of shoes, hairstyle, beard, mustache. So, what they tried to convey to me was that each and every aspect of the paintings that we see before us is a result of deep historical study. But it is also evident if we start looking a little more, it is also evident that there were many other readily available sources of artistic inspiration. One of the most obvious was Sobha Singh. Sobha Singh is a highly regarded and is probably the most well-known Punjabi artist whose image of Guru Nanak is known everywhere. This is how we imagine Guru Nanak today. The image on the left is Guru Nanak's portrait made by Sobha Singh sometime in the 1950s, perhaps 60s, and it went on to become so famous that today it is available in shrines, it is available on wall calendars, it is available in books. It's part of academic books, it's part of religious books. So to illustrate this point, the image on the right is a pocket calendar, the one that can come easily fit into our wallets. This is the pocket calendar which my optician gave me. So it is this much in size, maybe 5 inches or so. Yeah, it has an image of Guru Nanak, which is based on or copied from what Sobha Singh did way back, decades back. So Sobha Singh's students also admit that his influence was very, very prominent on not only them, but also everyone who came after him. After Sobha Singh, there were, of course, paintings created by the European Old Master, the Renaissance painters, whose images in museums, on lithographs, popular prints were known to anyone studying realism as an artistic style. I'll just give you an example just to illustrate to illustrate this point a little further. This is a canvas which is on display at the Bhai Das Museum, created by artist Bodh Raj, and it shows Guru Angad, who is looking after the sick and needy. The image shows a poor woman whose child is obviously very sick, who has come to seek the blessings of the Guru in the hope that the child will recover. And we see that there are impoverished people surrounding the woman and the child. So there's a blind man, there's a cripple, the man who is sitting down is obviously injured, and the Guru they all come to the Guru for solace. Now look at this print from the 19th century. This is a black and white print by Heinrich Hoffmann, which shows Jesus healing the sick. And when you compare these two images, you can see that they are identical. So this is a late 19th century print versus something that was made in the 1980. Of course, there are changes to fit into Sikh history, but there are also clear artistic inspiration. Yeah. And of course, in the South Asian context, when we think about the larger culture of popular art, popular visual culture, artists routinely copy each other's work. So coming back to the calendar itself, this was just a detour about the process of the creation of calendar. Coming back to the calendar itself, it was an extremely popular item, not only for the images that it showed, but each image carried a description, a story, and each calendar had a common theme. Themes like, so one calendar, again, I'll go back to the 1975 calendar. This was a calendar which, with the theme of women in Sikh history. The calendar began with the calendars of the Punjab and Sindh Bank began with an introduction. They told us that what is the value of these stories, and each of these pictures were accompanied by stories they described. So these calendars were like an illustrated storybook, actually. And by all accounts, they were extremely popular. They were also very significant. Punjab and Sindh Bank's activity of producing calendar for more than 3 decades, and commissioning paintings to create these calendars is an important thing to note. It's an important activity to note. Because this is the first time that many of the events from Sikh history were visually represented and visually represented in a realistic manner. And subsequently, these images became so popular that they created a template which continued to be followed decades later. Sobha Singh's Guru Nanak is just one example. The image of Banda Bahadur is another one. So every time you see Banda Bahadur, that's the only way he has been represented. It was the same set of artists who worked for the bank, who also worked for the government and the religious organizations. And books on Sikh history, whether they were for children or academic books or religious pamphlets, political posters, calendars, paintings from museums and exhibition, they were all of these things, they were commissioned by the religious authorities like SGPC and the Delhi Gurdwara Committee, but also simultaneously by the governments in Punjab and Delhi and Haryana. And government employees and office bearers in all of these different, seemingly distinct institutions, they work together with each other for a common and a united desire for promoting Sikh heritage. So this is a very strong network, and these are intersecting threads of patronage, which is important. What is also important is a realistic depiction of the Sikh past. So both these things, I'm trying to emphasize two things here. One, the strength of this network, which intersects, which seemingly is different, but it is overlapping all the time, it is intersecting all the time, and it is united by a common desire to commission and this kind of material, paintings, history paintings and museums, and to promote Sikh heritage. The second thing I'm emphasizing is that the realistic depiction of Sikh past in history paintings. Why? I think to understand the why, it is worthwhile to look at this quotation, which is available as soon as you enter the Bhai Mati Das Museum. There is an introductory panel in Gurumukhi, and it begins with these lines. It says, there's a story of a Pathan who was seen holding a paintbrush in his hand. A poet remarked, "O Pathan, a sword in your hand suits you better, not a paintbrush." To this, the Pathan replied, "You shall see. My paintbrush will bring alive history. When you see my paintings, feel them. Your hands shall pick up a sword on their own." So this actually very well conveys why these paintings are being commissioned and why are these paintings not only everywhere, but why are they specifically in the museum. And the narration of Sikh history, when supported by these realistic visuals, when the paintbrush brings alive history, it provides a very believable account of history. And these modern paintings, therefore, have come to be regarded as evidence of Sikh history rather than modern representations of it. And because these are sponsored by this very strong network, which supports the history paintings, commissions them, and extends the what it does, it extends the museum's reach and influence. So instead of just a char diwari, where it's just a museum with its display, isolated from the world, typically isolated from the world, in the Sikh museum, that is not the case. In the Sikh museum, the museum's display is available everywhere, which extends the reach of the museum. It extends the influence of the museum. Now, what is the story of the Sikh past in this museum? When you enter the Bhai Matidas museum and you walk through looking at these images, looking at stories of Sikh heritage, stories of the lives of Sikhs, the teachings of the gurus, it's a very powerful and an emotional experience. The women, the men shown here, they embody everything which is dear to the Sikh faith, which is essential to the Sikh faith, and it is held as ideal by the Sikh community. Selfless service, humility, equality, courage in the face of adversity, the ability to sacrifice oneself in the face of, in defense of one's belief. And therefore, when you see images of the gurus, their gentleness, their teachings, when you see paintings of martyrs giving up their life fearlessly, it can be a very moving and a very inspiring experience. So it can be also, it is a very heady mixture of history, storytelling, and hagiography. Yeah? There's adventure because you see horses charging towards the enemy. There are headless bodies on the battlefield. There are swords rising in the hands of the soldiers, and there's also reckless bravery. So it's a very heady mixture, and all presented in a very realistic way. And this is also very popular. You see it everywhere. These are stories which have been told to children since the childhood, and they keep hearing it again and again and again. And now they're seeing it in a museum also. So this is popular, but it is also very simplistic, and it does not quite do justice to the rather complex history of the community. Having seen the museum, the visitor would actually remain ignorant of the fact that Sikh actions were as much inspired by contemporary political, economic, social factors, and that the development of the community is heavily influenced by the Sufis, the Udasis, and the larger context of Punjabi culture. So there's very little indication of the diversity of practices and beliefs even within the tradition. The fact that the dominant Khalsa identity is the only one which is shown in the museum. There is no mention of the fact that Sikh culture, Sikh tradition outside of Punjab looks very different. And there are Sikh communities, thriving Sikh communities in other parts of India. And things like caste and gender also. While the museum does highlight the Guru's emphasis on equality of women and their condemnation of caste inequality, it does not quite explore the question of caste and gender and how it has affected the community's past and its present. So this is definitely a missed opportunity for developing a critical perspective towards the past. And especially today, when museums across the world, they are rethinking their role as public institutions, and they have been compelled to engage with questions of representation, diversity, you cannot fail to see that this approach is lacking in Sikh museums. Now I'll try and conclude that what is the relevance of all of this, the points I have raised here. Firstly, in the case of the Sikh Museum in India, the museum display is already available outside, whether in a narrative form, as stories, or as paintings, as material objects. Yeah. So the question before us is then why does it need a museum? If everything is already everywhere, why do you need a museum? And why have so many Sikh museums being built in India? That's the first thing we must think about. Secondly, there are several unique characteristics of Sikh museums. So, what exactly is a Sikh museum, therefore, and what does it tell us about the form and the role of the museum as an institution, and especially in a non Western context? Thirdly, museum as a public institution. Worldwide, it is under immense scrutiny today. Yeah. And there are many questions about which museums' dominance and their work so far is being challenged. These are questions of provenance of their objects, which are mostly gotten acquired through colonial violence and loot. It's a question of repatriation, um, lack of representation of historically marginalized groups, their treatment of religious objects and their role in illegal traffic of antiquities, especially from today's war-affected areas. So these are all the questions again about which museum as a public institution is under heavy scrutiny. They've been seriously criticized, and in fact, the International Council of Museums very recently was debating the question of what exactly is a museum. They have to they had to come up with a definition to convey to the world that this is what we think a museum is, and therefore it is what the role of the museum is. This was so heavily debated that the ICOM nearly fell apart on this question. And this is because museums today are one of the most contested cultural institutions. Yeah. So, where do Sikh museums figure in this scenario is a question we must think about. Finally, within India, heritage is a big industry now, and it's a growing one. So, you know of heritage corridors, entire parts of cities have been transformed into heritage corridors. There are exhibitions, there are museums, there are heritage walks, there are immersive experiences. So, heritage is a big industry. At the same time, parallel to this, we also see an aggressive push to define heritage, to claim heritage, and to very aggressively say, very clearly say that who is part of this heritage, whose history and culture is heritage, and who is not included in this heritage. And we are no longer talking about individuals' private lives or communities' private life. We are talking about heritage in public life and in governance. So, heritage is very aggressively being claimed and promoted. And it's the same time when the Sikh community has especially been under the spotlight in the recent past, the recent decade. About there have been questioned, the community has been questioned about its history, about its religion, and about its contribution to the nation. So, in this scenario, what do we know about Sikh heritage? And I think raising questions like these make it worthwhile to study Sikh museums because they provide a vantage point into these debates of identity, nationhood, citizenship to that nationhood, heritage, and its politics. I'll end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanika, for such a comprehensive, presentation. And I'm sure there must be so many questions. So I would really request Namyata to come in and share her insights and her questions. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Kanika for the talk. And your work really encourages us to rethink and reconsider the established notion of the museology and the process of museumization. Uh, Plus, there were quite a few examples and ideas in the book which really intrigued me to read more along those lines. So now I would like to begin with the questions. There are just two queries. So, ma'am, in your work, you give a number of examples uh, where it is shown how Sikh museums have challenged the conventional idea of what a museum is. Generally, museum is seen as an institution where the focus is more upon the artifacts, the collections, the tangible items, to put it simply. Uh, but on the contrary, when we uh, read about the Sikh museums, we see that the emphasis here is more upon the community building process, the representation of the community, the memory, and basically the importance of their lived experience is something which is emphasized here. So I was wondering whether the Sikh museums can be seen as a breakthrough in the study of in the museology itself. And in that sense, could Sikh museums be also can they be seen as an example of what scholars have recently described uh, as the post museum?
Shall I respond to each question or comment, or should we would you like to combine a couple of questions? How would you prefer it?
Uh, Ma'am, maybe we can continue with that. Maybe you can answer this question
Okay.
first.
I do emphasize this point that Sikh museums are not our typical museums, whether we are thinking of the most well-known museums in the West or the most well-known museums in India. I'm in Delhi, so the National Museum or the NGMA, or they are very different kinds of museums, or even say the most well-known museums in South Asia, whether it's the Lahore Museum or the Indian Museum, the Government Museum in Chennai, and even the modern museums that have come up in the last 2 or 3 decades. Um, they are very different, and I did raise a few points on why I think they're different. Their display is unusual. There is an overlap of secular and sacred. The patronage is they're being commissioned by both religious authorities and the government. So there's a curious mix and match going on, which prevents an easy characterization of what kind of museum it is. Yeah. Um, Representation of memory, most certainly, because it is the story of the Sikh community. And um, I remember one of the gentlemen I spoke to during my research work about, he was one of the employees at the bank, and he participated in creation of these history paintings and museums. And he said that we create these paintings and retell our stories to keep the community alive. Yeah. And this is something that is done in the daily Sikh prayer, the Ardas, as well. Yeah? You retell it as a story, and this again and again and again, which helps the community remember, which keeps the community together. And the museum is also trying to do that at one level. So yes, there is importance of that storytelling of the memory and of the memory, but we should also remember that it is a selective memory, as all memories and their representations are. There is, for instance, one way of the selection we see is that after the gurus or after the Maharaja Ranjit Singh reign, there's practical in the Bhai Mati Das Museum. There's practically nothing on contemporary. There's actually nothing on contemporary Sikh community. So there's no mention of the partition. There's no mention of 1984. These are two major episodes which have profoundly shaped the Sikh experience. and Sikh memory in independent India. We don't find that. So yes, it is a retelling of the memory. It is a retelling of history. Whether I would call it a breakthrough in the field of museums, probably not. But it is certainly, like I said, and I have argued that it is very, very important for us to pay attention to Sikh museums. Sikh museums are being created by a community which is only about 2% of the Indian population. But we do not see a comparable museumization drive in any other social groups in India. The way Sikhs have created museums continuously is something remarkable, and it tells us how the Sikh community sees itself, and it tells us how it sees the community sees itself in independent India in relation to both the nation and in relation to the other communities in it. So this is a museumizing drive which no one has done, no other social group has done.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. Also, you discussed how Sikh museums are also shaped by the location within their sacred landscapes and by the sponsorship from the religious and secular authorities. At the same time, in the book, there is an example of the Virasat-e Khalsa. So sites such as Virasat-e Khalsa are interpreted within the broader framework of monumental architecture, minority assertion, and even in the emergence of Holocaust museum paradigm in India. So, how do you see the museum operating within this political field, particularly when the historical narratives, such as the story of Baghel Singh, continue to re-emerge in the contemporary political arena, like the farmer protest? So, do the Sikh museums merely serve as the spaces of remembrance, or do they also uh, contribute to the active politics of the Indian public sphere?
Well, they most certainly contribute to active politics. The title of my book says Heritage Politics and Popular Culture. So Sikh museums, my argument is, are inherently political. They are political institutions. One example is what you picked up, the Baghel Singh episode. Um, I'll just quickly tell everyone else what this is about. In one of the chapters of the book, I think it's just the one before the conclusion, it talks about how the story of Sikh conquest of Delhi in the 18th century, led by a military commander called Baghel Singh, how this becomes part of both the farmers' protests, but also as a commemorative event being organized every year by Sikh religious groups and political establishments, and how both these commemorations, whether in the farmers' protest or by the religious groups, they are about the same story, but they have different political uses. Yeah. So one way is that the museum keeps the paintings which are very much part of the celebrations, both at the farmers' protest and at the Red Fort, as by the religious groups. So in one way, it is the keeper of that story. It authorizes that story. At no point one can say that, where did you get this painting from? Anyone can point to it and say that this is in a museum. You can go and check. So like the point I made earlier, that the history paintings, not only the stories, but the history paintings themselves are now considered evidence of Sikh past. So both the story as well as the painting itself as a physical object, the museum authorizes, gives it greater legitimacy than it would be as part of, say, an oral tradition, or just part of a children's storybook, or just being part of the religious literature. So that's one way the museum contributes to the politics. There's another way in which the Sikh museum is a political institution. And I mentioned that the Bhai Mati Das Museum does not mention the partition, does not talk about 1984. None of the Sikh museums in Delhi do. It's only recently that a memorial has been built for November 1984, the anti-Sikh violence which was unleashed on the community after the assassination of Indira Gandhi. But the Sikh museums, but that's a very recent thing, and Sikh museums in Delhi typically do not address 1984. Interestingly, the Central Sikh Museum in the Golden Temple, Amritsar, talks very boldly about 1984. It has a portrait of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. It celebrates the assassins of the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Their portraits are up in and are displayed as martyrs. So the fact that you can do it in Amritsar and the fact that you can't do it in Delhi tells you that this is a relative difference in the political situation of the Sikhs in both these places. Yeah. The third way in which Sikh museums are political is how and when and what gets displayed. So one of the episodes I described where the Central Sikh Museum was directly related to the political episodes, so electoral democratic episodes. I'll just, I think, look it up and read it out if I can find it. Yeah, it's on page 110, the last part of the conclusion. And I've pointed out that the Central Sikh Museum in Amritsar, it actively incorporates paintings of people and events whom the SGPC, which controls the museum and the Golden Temple, and the SGPC is controlled by, and was very largely for a very long time, entirely controlled by the Shiromani Akali Dal Badal, which is a political party in Punjab. So what goes into the museum, which event, which portrait goes into the museum, is decided by the SGPC as and when it decides this person or this event is worthwhile and important for us to commemorate. And in 2022, the SGPC installed the portrait of Dilawar Singh in Central Sikh Museum. Now, Dilawar Singh, who is Dilawar Singh? He blew himself up as a human bomb, killing the former Punjab Chief Minister Bent Singh. This was in the year 1995. And according to SGPC, Dilawar Singh had the Guru's blessings and he had sacrificed himself to put an end to state atrocities against the Sikhs. This is what SGPC said when it included Dilawar Singh's portrait in the museum. And this portrait ceremony inclusion was done in June 2022, and it is important in the context of the electoral situation in Punjab then. This is the time Akali Dal had once dominated Punjab politics, but it had nearly been wiped out at this particular point. Yeah. And this is the Punjab Legislative Assembly elections, which were held in February 2022, and Akali Dal did very poorly. So in its long-term alliance with the Hindu right-wing BJP was also over, and BJP had been actively trying to poach its territory in Punjab. So the Akali Dal Badal has a propensity to whip up religious issues, which are called Panthic issues, when it is outside power. Yeah. So the SGPC, which is controlled by the Akali Dal, it announced the inclusion of Dilawar Singh in the museum when there was a by-poll for the seat, the Sangrur seat, just around the corner. And Akali Dal's candidate was Kamaldeep Kaur, who was the sister of Balwant Singh Rajwana, who was a close associate of Dilawar Singh and had participated in this episode, yeah, in 1995. So Dilawar Singh had been awarded a death sentence, and Kamaldeep Kaur's candidature coincided with Dilawar Singh's inclusion in the museum. So this is how it was related. Yeah. So this is direct relation to electoral politics. So there are many layers of political of the museum being a political institution.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Namyata. Thank you, Dr. Kanika, for such an impressively comprehensive answer. So, if anyone else would wish to ask any question, please feel free to unmute yourself or put your question in the chat box. We don't have any question yet, but if it is possible and if you could spare like a few more minutes, I would just like to ask one question. Uh, so I when I was reading about I was reading your book. I haven't finished it yet fully. But when I was reading and I was reading other books on Punjab and and popular books on Punjab, even Harun Khalid's book, and how he traces the entire Gurudwara and several of his books on that. So I was wondering, like in the current scenario, when there is, like you also mentioned that there is immersive experience in museums, and there's so much of media and popularization coming in. So we have Sikh research institutes as well, where the focus is to kind of familiarize the general public about Sikhism and how and the Sikh gurus. Do you think like there's a tussle or there is a tension between one group where the focus between like one aspect where this focus is on expanding and a more inclusive approach, and then there is another dimension where or the aspect where the focus is on making the community gated and to protect the roots. So, should we look at museum as if it's offering a space for other communities also to know more about the Sikh gurus and the struggle, or it is also it is more about protecting the cultural heritage or conserving it. So how do we look at it? So so specifically, if I may ask about so this incident of Char Sahibzade, and it's coinciding this with Christmas and how there's always a debate about it. So how do we look at Sikh museums in terms of its relationship with other communities and within their understanding within? If you could touch upon it.
Tension between groups and relationship with other communities. The Sikh museums I have looked at, they are not contested spaces in the sense that they are made by the dominant Khalsa group, and they are promoted to promote that very version again and again and again. In fact, the introductory panel at the Bhai Mati Das Museum says it very clearly, and so do other museums, that this museum, the paintings in it, uh, are being preserved. Are being presented and being preserved so that younger generations could get inspired from them and emulate their ancestors and be Singhs and Khalsas. So it is very clear the idea is to inspire people to follow the Khalsa version of Sikhism. And because there is a lack of representation of any other views, there is no question of encouragement or keeping an open mind about these things by the people who are sponsoring the museums. Are other people challenging it from within the community? Um, no, as far as I know, at least not vocally. There are no parallel museums being set up. There are no, and nobody has publicly disputed what is being presented here, or have tried to provide an alternative understanding either. What is the relationship with other communities? That's the Sikh museums do it in a very, I would say, subtle way. So they don't say that this is how we feel about, say, Hindus, this is how we feel about Udasis, this is how we feel about Christians, and this is how we feel about Muslims. No. What we have to do is to read against the grain of what is being presented, read in between lines, and here in between the layers of paint to see what is being said without being overtly stated. So one way of understanding this is to see what is not included. Another way of in the storytelling, how are other communities spoken of? So on the one hand, there is a very visible um, and prominently displayed friendship between the gurus, the Sikh gurus, and Muslim saints like Baba Farid, for instance. Deep friendship, and there are other examples which are very much part of the museum. Yeah. At the same time, I would say that the only community which is shown as an antagonist here is the Muslim community, and that othering is done visually. It's very much like the Amar Chitra Katha style, where you can see a very clear, visible visual othering, the way they are drawn, the way the colors that are used, the way their facial expressions are presented. There is a visual othering. But that's all. That's not because. Okay, let me also go a little beyond that and say that this is the. So how do I explain it? So it will be a very, very lengthy response. Um, you should also understand that the Sikhs are a minority community in a Hindu-dominated India. So at no point of time, so this response or this kind of response is also to be seen, or this kind of representation is also to be seen within that context. Yeah. So, like I said, there is nothing overt that we like or dislike a particular community, but the relationships or the power equations between the different community are expressed in subtle ways through these paintings and through these narratives.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think since we do not have any other question, and we have also overshot, I have just realized. So if there's no question, then maybe we can wind up. So, thank you so very much, Dr. Kanika and Namyata and other participants for joining us today for the Dark Baithak. Um, and we'll see you next week on Saturday. And Dr. Kanika, we are waiting for your next book, which probably would be on the next Gurudwara, the Bangla side, maybe on in Delhi. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, everyone, and the team at TheDaak Baithak. Thank you, Namyata, for moderating the session. Thank you, Sakshi, very much. And I really enjoyed this discussion. The questions were excellent. And thank you for reading my book.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
ma'am.
Bye.